CityCast Pittsburgh is supported by Fulton Commons. If you're looking for a gorgeous co-working space with lots of light and some truly wonderfully funky decor, check out Fulton Commons on the north side. The historic but very well renovated old school building is deep in the neighborhood by a park, tucked away but still super close to anywhere you want to be. They've got offices and common spaces. It's perfect for organizations or individuals, and they even have a shared food production kitchen on site. So there's lots of food-related events for their members. If this sounds like your dream co-working space, visit fultonpgh.org to request a tour. Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, no one knows exactly how many sets of city steps Pittsburgh has, or had. It's definitely in the hundreds, maybe at one point nearly 1,000, but cataloging and preserving them has been a relatively new priority. Today, we are up in the hills with 3 authors of a new book, hoping to give Pittsburghers a fresh perspective on and a friendly guide to these very old, sometimes treacherous paths up and down our very steep hills. It's Wednesday, July 16th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. I'm with one of those 3 authors, Laura Zarowski, who's climbed all of them, or at least all that you can find. Laura, can you describe where we are in Pittsburgh right now?
Yeah, so this morning we're here in Troy Hill on the Basin Street City Stairs, overlooking both the Allegheny River. We've got views of downtown. The Heinz 57 stacks are right in front of us. The David McCullough 16th Street Bridge features prominently. And across the way, you can see the beautiful green hillside of the lower hill.
And it's kind of sweeping, but also we're in this teeny tiny little alcove on a bench. What is it that you love about the specific set of city steps?
So I really love Basin Street in Troy Hill because it's a very old flight of stairs, going back to the turn of the last century when this neighborhood was being developed. And it's just, there's a really wonderful connection with history. And today it has such an incredible view of downtown. And when you see the downtown area, we're able to see all of the different layers of history, you know, the modern day skyscrapers that are being built, but also you can see what were the skyscrapers of 100 years ago, you know, the buildings that were 10 or 12 stories tall that, you know, made national headline news when they were engineered and constructed. So it's just a really lovely, quiet spot to, I don't know, just kind of meditate on the city. I love it here.
Yeah, and kind of tucked between a bunch of backyards too, which is kind of fun. You do really get a sense of the age of the space.
Yes, it's still a very residential neighborhood here.
Yeah, and I don't want to leave anyone out. We are rolling extremely deep today. Producers Sophia and Mallory are here with us. Hey, Pittsburgh editor Francesca, along with your co-authors, Matthew Jacob.
Hello.
And Charles Suckup. Hey.
Hello.
I know y'all have this book. It's so great. I've got it here in my backpack. City Steps of Pittsburgh, A History and Guide. It is exactly what it sounds like, part history, part field guide. And in the beginning, y'all talk a lot about the very unique circumstances that brought the 3 of y'all together to write it. Laura, take us back to the Instagram space and your handle, Missteps.
Yes. So 7-8 years ago, I was still relatively new to Pittsburgh, had only been living here a few years at that point, and I came upon one of Bob Regan's books. Now, Bob Regan is a University of Pittsburgh Pitt engineering professor who back in the late 1990s set out to
You make
discover.
that sound so far away, like late 1990s, the late 1900s.
Well, it was 25 years ago at this point, more than 25 years ago. That does seem like a long time. And so Bob had written two books in the very early 2000s, and I found one of them at a local store and thought to myself, I wanted to get to know Pittsburgh more. I wanted to walk around more, and I had started to notice the city steps and was very curious and kind of fascinated to realize that there were hundreds of them.
He'd made such a huge strides in that. I think, if I'm getting it right, he mapped 739 sets in 66 neighborhoods. So
Yes.
like 2/3 of the city. That's pretty solid.
And Bob did all of that at a time before we had all of the technology that we have today. So there were no online maps of where the city steps were. GPS didn't really even fully exist at that point.
And we're going to talk more about that because your co-conspirators had a lot to do with what we know now.
Absolutely. So I just started recreating Bob's journey, and his City Steps book kind of lists the city steps that he found in order. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to do that. And so I started Missed Steps, Missed Connections with Pittsburgh's City Steps, and I was sharing it on Instagram, and I had a blog and whatnot. And through that, really kind of got connected with a very large community of people, both in Pittsburgh as well as people who are from Pittsburgh but living far away, who really connected with the city steps and had great memories of them. And so I always feel very grateful that I kind of stumbled into something that really had a much bigger life of its own, that the city steps are something that was just so important and very memorable to so many Pittsburghers.
And I think stumbling is putting it lightly. Like, you found over 100 more of these steps. I think
Yes.
that's pretty impressive too. Matthew, you were working for the city's Department of Public Works, as I understand it, creating our first ever digital database for infrastructure. I hope you don't mind me saying, you're not that old. Like, I'm amazed that we didn't have a digital database for this stuff.
Yeah, so when I came to the city, we did not have maps of many of our pieces of infrastructure. So we didn't have we had Bob's maps of the steps, but they hadn't been updated.
But that's
since
like
he
a
had made
private
them.
citizen. That is not
Yeah,
the city.
mhm. Yeah, and so we didn't have maps of our bridges, we didn't have maps of our buildings, we didn't have maps of our retaining walls, of many other things. So very limited. And we were kind of implementing a system where we could track everything in one place. So that's what I was working on, and that's how I got into the city steps. Because when I inherited Bob's mapping of it, I started looking on like Google Street View and stuff and realized a lot of these aren't here anymore. And so maybe before I put this system in place, we should kind of validate if they are around still. And so in my time working at the city, I went to all of the city steps in Bob's list and also additionally mapped additional city steps that were not in Bob's list. So
Yeah. So, I mean, well, as the arbiter of this stuff, at least back in 2017 and beyond, like, what is our number? Do we know a city steps number?
so that number changes depending on who you talk
I
to.
know.
And so part of the reason is that, not to get too technical or boring, but, when Bob mapped them, for instance, Oakley Street in the South Side Slopes would have been mapped as one set of steps. But when you go there, there's like 6 different flights that are broken up by blocks, by streets. And so that was kind of inconsistently categorized when you came across that. And so we decided at that point to break that up into 6 different sets of steps rather than one really long set of steps. So that
You're reminding
increased
me
the number.
Yeah, of like when we were checking out like the National Register for bridges, like I didn't realize like an off ramp is its own
Yeah,
bridge,
exactly.
separate from
So
what
that-
we consider
and
the
that leads
structure of the
to-
bridge.
Right. And so that leads to debate about how many bridges does Pittsburgh have? Like, is a highway overpass a bridge? Some would say yes, some would say no. So, and then in addition to that, I mapped some of the steps that were in our parks. But, like, are those city steps? Do they have the same feel as city steps? Not exactly, but they're on the list because they're steps the city maintains. So.
Yeah, so if it's concrete with or without a railing going up a mediocre or larger hill, it counts. Is that kind of it?
There's wooden steps all over the city. There's
That's true.
steps made out of brick.
I don't want to
There's steps
diminish
made out
the
of
wooden steps.
railroad ties and asphalt. So there's a lot of material that's used to make city steps as well.
It's so funny. I mean, it's funny to hear the city be like, yeah, it's sort of vibes.
Yeah.
Charles, I know you were working in the then newly established city archives trying to process 200 years worth of municipal records. Once again, utterly shocked that this is a thing we had not started doing. Like if Matthew's job at the time sounds hard, I think yours sounds sort of Sisyphean.
Yeah, it is really incredible that the city went 200 years without a city archive. But what's more incredible is that we have material to archive, that not all the documents were flooded in basements.
Or burned or any other,
Burned,
like
lost,
were just thrown
stolen,
away because
exactly.
nobody paid attention. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to the beginning. Why does Pittsburgh have so many steps?
It was the first mass transportation system. So Charles's work in the archive was really instrumental in that it helped us to determine that the first city steps, when the city started getting into the business of building city steps, it was in the 1870s. And the very first flight connected what is considered now like uptown Soho area down to the river, which today there's a lot of highways and parking lots and a
But you
trail
can still
there.
kind of see some remnants of it when you drive by on the Parkway.
Yes. And at the time, there were mills that lined all of that. Right. So the city started building the city steps really at the request of the business owners who needed to have a more reliable transportation method because people lived, for the most part, up on the hilltops and the industry lined the rivers. The river view that we have today is very different than what it was here in the 1800s and early 1900s, and people were just kind of scrambling up and down the well-worn paths along the hillsides to be able to get to the mills. So city steps were a much more reliable transportation method. And this is also in a period, really before the automobile. There were omnibuses and things like that existed around the city, but people had to pay to use those. Those were like the horse-drawn carriages, the precursors to electrified trolleys and whatnot.
And streetcars, and we got the inclines eventually.
And all of that. But people had to pay money to use that. So even though they were available to people, it was not something that the average working class person or the average immigrant family was going to be able to afford on a very regular basis.
Yeah.
And if you could pay, a lot of people would just go down the city steps for free and then pay to get back up the hill.
Okay, that makes more sense. What happened to all of these spaces as our industries changed? Because I think that's a really striking thing about your book. And also we can all see it if we ever pass by a set of city steps. Like some of them are stunning and in great shape. Some of them look like they were built 100+ years ago.
Yeah. So a lot of steps that are built in concrete were built, they may have existed in wood prior to that, but a lot of them were built in the post-war era, right after World War II. And a lot of them have not been upgraded since. So a lot of the concrete steps that you see that look kind of similar are all, have had minor repairs made, but that's about it since the post-war era. And that's what got me interested in the steps a lot as I went to them. And especially, we always like to talk about Rising Main, which is over in Fineview. It's a very long concrete set of steps, but there's really not much there anymore. And it makes you stop and think, why was this built? Like, this had to have been built for a purpose at some time. So what's changed since then? And what had changed over there, for instance, is that the entire neighborhood of the East Street Valley was destroyed to make the highway that goes to the northern suburbs, essentially. And so at a time, there was a very dense neighborhood at the bottom, and people would use those steps. But now there's really not much there, and there's unfortunately not much practicality in fixing those steps because of how much it would cost to do, with not much of a utility to them anymore, unfortunately. So
yeah. How do these systems get prioritized? Like, at what point does the city see this and say, like, oh, this is necessary infrastructure, we need to do something about this, we need to maintain it? Like, how does that calculus happen?
So, the costs to repair steps now are far more than they were back in the day, right? And the city has a limited budget and many other priorities, as people are aware, like our bridges and things like that.
I
as
understand
well.
that the bridges probably take priority. That makes sense.
Sure. So when I was at the city, one of the projects that we worked on was using all the data from the steps and combining that with other information such as like proximity to public transit and how frequently that transit gets used, proximity to schools, as well as they gave it a detour score, so that if these steps weren't here, how long would it take me to go from the top to the bottom around not using them?
Cool.
So trying to bring that calculus into it, and of course condition and things like that. So that information was used, and we actually started that project right before COVID kind of shut everything down.
Mm-hmm.
And then when things picked back up, it was kind of a blessing in disguise in the sense that there's a lot of infrastructure money coming in from the federal government. So that data was able to be readily used and go work on lots and lots of steps. But since then, where the city has to rely entirely on its own budget, they can maybe fix like 2 or 3 a year fully.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really limits what they can do with that when we have hundreds and hundreds of them.
However, I always like to tell people that it's really important to use 311 and connect with your city council person wherever you live. If you don't know who your counselor is, go online and find out, because if you have, and this is city steps, this is sidewalks, this is like any of the infrastructure that's where you live, work, or play, if you see something that is not right, the railing is missing on a flight of stairs, or something has become loose, 311 it. It does not mean that it's going to be repaired the next day.
Right.
It may actually take up to a year, but persistent and consistent effort of reaching out. Those requests are recorded, they are listened to, and even doing things kind of the old-fashioned way, which is, getting signatures from your neighbors. That is also a really important step, and that is something that the city public works, the elected officials do look at.
I would also add like overgrown greenery, or if like animals are
yes,
living in an
absolutely.
unsafe space, stuff like that too.
Yes.
And if you do a 311, include lots of pictures, and don't say there's a broken step on a set of steps that's 300 steps long. Please say where it is, so that you don't make the guy who has to go look for it walk the entire set of steps to go figure out where the problem is.
Yeah, absolutely. The more details you add, the better.
Yeah, so before there was 311, people just used pen and paper. So inside the city
Charles,
archive,
I love that you're bringing us back to basics here.
we're currently processing a collection of essentially complaints to city council from 1911 up through the 1970s. Some are written on napkins, some are typed on fancy stationery, but they are all complaints, and a lot of them are city steps. Rialto Street used to have houses going down it.
Yeah.
And so we have letters from them saying Rialto Street is really steep. They would like the city to pave it because it wasn't paved for so long.
Can you imagine going down Rialto on like something like gravel or dirt, especially with all of the rain we get?
Yeah. And a lot of times, especially if it was a woman who's writing this letter, they probably knew that they might not have been looked at or might not have had as much importance. So they'd usually go to their husband or somebody else that had stationery to Carnegie Steel, and they would write their letter on the Carnegie Steel stationery. To kind of get some more attention to their plight.
It's
of living
like
there.
writing an email with like your work signature, you
or CCing somebody really important on
Yeah,
it, so
yeah,
make sure it
exactly.
gets seen. So, and then we also have the replies from council members. Sometimes they weren't replied to, but sometimes they were replied to, and that's a good way to get things done.
I mean, do you have any sense of whether our historical council people took it any more or less seriously than our modern ones?
Probably more, because they were more used, and in the book we mentioned that during one mayoral campaign, they were a topic of the campaign. There was the competitor to David Lawrence, Waddell. He would go out the steps and do photo ops of how terrible condition they were and things like that. And so it's hard to imagine today a mayoral campaign going out the city steps to point out problems with the city. But
I would argue
was
that
a
is
big topic.
very adjacent to what we recently witnessed in our most recent mayoral campaign.
Infrastructure is still a topic, but it's
Yeah.
not city steps. It's other things. So yeah.
Fair enough.
And then a lot of people used to get hurt on the city steps, either die or break their legs, and so they'd write letters and file lawsuits, so we know how much money they got paid out. And
Wait, how much money did they get paid out?
a lot of money. And yeah, there may have been or may not have been some corruption back then, which led to some more lawsuits, because people know if I went to this doctor and got this note, I could take it back to the city. And get whatever the payout was.
Interesting.
So financial incentive for the city to reconstruct the steps in concrete, even though it costs a lot. They were also spending a lot on lawsuits from the decrepit wooden steps all over the city. So
Yeah, I mean, we still spend a lot on lawsuits, but usually not for city steps these days.
Today's show is brought to you by Liberty Magic, Pittsburgh's premier speakeasy theater dedicated to the art of elevating magic. They're currently presenting Lee Terbosic in Plain Slate, a show all about the art of deception. You may have seen Lee on TV shows like America's Got Talent and History's Greatest Mysteries. And now's your chance to catch him up close in Pittsburgh, which just so happens to be his hometown. Each performance of In Plain Slate carefully mixes comedy, magic, and mind reading to create a truly unforgettable experience. Lee pairs astonishing allusions with personal stories in a way that's made this show a beloved staple at Liberty Magic. And if you're feeling extra adventurous, you can upgrade to the Skeleton Key VIP experience for a seat right by the stage, plus an exclusive meet and greet after the show. In Plain Slate runs now through August 9th. Get your tickets at trustarts.org/magic before they disappear.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso Virtual Coffee Machines. Ready to enjoy the bold flavors of barista-quality Nespresso iced coffee at home? Simply fill a glass with ice and press the brew button on your virtual pop machine to enjoy rich double espressos roasted to stand up even when chilled. Refreshingly bold iced coffee. Refreshingly easy to make at home. Visit Nespresso.com to shop now.
You three, and of course, Bob Regan before you, are probably to credit for helping get these so recognized for the incredible public asset that they are. I would love for y'all to tell me about a few of your favorites.
My favorite, which has already been mentioned by Laura, are the steps that go from 2nd Avenue to the Bluff. While those are not the original, steps from the 1870s, of course, it is the original hillside that those steps traversed. And as Laura mentioned, there were mills at the bottom, kind of where the county jail is now. That was a neighborhood. And the students who lived in that neighborhood had to go to school at Forbes School, which is right near Mercy Hospital today. So they were used by not only adults going to work, but also children going to school. So I find that those steps really interesting. And they're just very precarious. If you've ever walked down them, you have to cross over Boulevard of the Allies, walk straight down between an interstate highway and a cliff, and come right down at the Armstrong Tunnel.
So you started us off really strong with something extremely dicey.
I would definitely say Rising Main, which has already been mentioned. I would also say that if you're going to explore steps, probably the best time of year to do it is in the fall or winter, actually.
Yeah.
With the leaves down, because you get some really unique views from different sets. So that's probably the best time to go check them out. In terms of other favorite sets of steps, I lived in the Southside Slopes for 5 years, so you couldn't go anywhere without using city steps in some fashion.
You shouldn't. They're very efficient over there.
Yeah. So St. Michael Street has some very unique views, and there's a lot of cats that hang out on those steps, so that's fun. And then I grew up in Point Breeze, and we thought when we were kids that we knew like a secret shortcut, but those were just city steps. So those ones I like because we thought it was like a cool secret, but
I mean, for a lot of people, I would argue it still is kind of a cool secret. Laura, what about you?
I always like to recommend going out to the South Hills to the Jacob Street stairs, which straddle between Overbrook and Brookline. It is the longest flight of city steps that you can really complete from top to bottom.
That still exists, you mean?
That still exists. But my real favorite part about all of this is that it does also run alongside the freight rail line, which I love. I know freight trains are very controversial, but they are such an important part of Pittsburgh's history and its growth and development, and it is still an active line. So for anyone that just likes to watch the trains go by, please be very careful, but you can go near that area and see that. And once again, it's just a part of being in a place where history has been in continuous operation and being built for such a long period of time. And so I really like Jacob Street and that whole area.
Yeah, and I also want to shout out the field guide portion of your book is just very fun. Like you've got lists of like the longest flights of stairs, the steepest streets in Pittsburgh. Do y'all ever find new ones? Do you ever think you found a new one, like furiously text each other and be like, wait, did we know about this one? Was this one on the list?
So this is probably, maybe like 3 years ago, someone had messaged me about several flights of stairs that existed off of Gazam Street, which is in the Crawford Roberts section of the Hill District. And it's an area that once was extremely densely populated and is now, there is still residents that are there, but a lot of it is hillside that's overgrown. And it had shown me like some photos of these, very post-apocalyptic, photos of, crumbling stairs surrounded by greenery. And I went out and I explored because that's what I like to do. Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow, this is interesting. And then started looking at the historical maps and things like Historic Pittsburgh, which has all the different photos, talking to people like Charles, and realized, there had been, back in the 40s and 50s, one of the largest public housing developments was constructed in this area at that time. And all of that infrastructure was created to support the housing, which no longer, a certain portion of that housing still exists, but not to the extent that had originally been constructed. And that hillside, still has, that concrete and steel lasts a long time, and it's still there. So it's fascinating because Pittsburgh is so depopulated. All of this infrastructure was built for 700,000 people, particularly, as Matt mentioned earlier, in the post-World War II era, when so much of this construction was being concretized, literally, and now we have not quite 300,000 people. So
we have just over 300,000 people.
Okay, all right, a little over 300, give or take. But still, it was all built for when we had 400,000 more people here.
I know.
So there's a lot of empty hillsides that are empty now, but were not empty in the 1940s and the 1950s.
A lot of foundations, a lot of staircases that lead to nowhere because there used to be a home tucked right there.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's, I think, when people, if we quote unquote discover new sets, it's usually ones that have been long abandoned and like a skeleton of some old sets of steps. So
it's more like paleontology at that point than mapping infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, you mentioned cooler weather, winter season is a little bit easier to discover some of these spaces. Any other suggestions you have for folks who maybe want to check this stuff out?
Be careful about parking. Pittsburghers are very particular about where you park if you're.
Definitely.
And sometimes it's hard to find parking near sets of city steps.
A lot of these are tucked into really tiny residential areas where the streets are narrow. You want to be polite and be respectful of the parking chair.
Absolutely. That would be one of my suggestions for sure.
Yeah.
I guess my suggestion would be just to be very cautious because in certain areas, it looks like, I'm hiking in some mountain wilderness area. But it's remembering that there had been people that were living there, and at different points of time, there's infrastructure that was created. So there are some places, like I think of Waco Way over on the north side, that, there are open sewer holes and whatnot. It's a really cool place to explore. There are interesting old city steps. There's old streets, old guardrails, and all kinds of things that are there. But you also have to be really careful, and that's when you're just walking around because you don't want to fall into something. That's
don't
another
fall
thing.
into the
Don't
manholes.
fall into something.
Got it.
Yeah. Watch your step. Yeah.
I think I would also, to get a better sense of the evolution of the steps before you go, if you know what steps you're going to go on.
Well, I mean, they need to take your book, of course.
First buy our book. After you buy our book, then look at the photographs within it. Also go to Historic Pittsburgh, look at their photographs, go to the city archives, look at our photographs. So when you walk down city steps, you can see these houses that are no longer there. You can see the world that was built for those other people. And just see the evolution of the community, I think, is fascinating.
Yeah, many of those photos taken by Matthew, of course.
Yes.
Well, is there anything that you're working on now? I have heard a rumor that perhaps a second book could be in the works. How can folks tap in if they want to engage with what you're up to?
Yeah, so we are working on a second book. This will be Pittsburgh's Parks, Playgrounds, and Trails, a history and guide. That's the tentative title for it. And
Gosh, the research just sounds terrible.
And we just recently signed a contract for it. If all goes well, it should be out sometime October of 26 of next year. There's a lot of fascinating characters that were involved in all of this, some of whom we know of today and some that have been forgotten over time. And so we're really hoping to, give voice to all of the people that were very involved in creating the many, many parks and playgrounds that we have here in the city. It's a real asset.
Yeah.
And we're really excited to do it. Photographing wildlife is a lot harder than photographing steps, so it's been interesting.
It's a new creative challenge.
Yeah, it's been interesting to learn that. But going back to a topic earlier, we also did not have maps of our trails at the city at all, and so during COVID, I needed to get out of the house. My dog desperately needed to get out of the house, and so I knew we had no trail map, and I took a GPS unit and walked my dog on every single trail and mapped all of our trails. And so that really got me.
Wait, like every trail in the city?
Every trail.
Wait, what's the number for that?
Oh, I mean,
Laura's clapping.
There's a mileage count somewhere.
I'll have to buy the book. It's fine.
We'll figure that out. There's a total mileage, including river trails and things like that. But so did all that, got more in touch with parks I'd never explored, and really came to enjoy a lot of the parks, and am really excited to share that and get people out into the parks.
Yeah. Charles, I will close with you. Is there anything that y'all have learned from your research that just blew you away? Give us a tease of the book that's coming.
Yeah, there's two great ones about Shenley. One was obviously people were eyeing the Shenley property in Oakland for housing development for obvious reasons.
Yeah. Shenley Park, beautiful resource, but I can imagine it was coveted land in its day.
It would have been a great neighborhood. But the developer, as the story goes, was in a race with Bigelow. And they crossed the ocean since Shenley was living in England at the time. And Bigelow, got to Shenley, a mere hours or days before this developer did, and would convince, Mary Shenley to turn over the property, as opposed to the developer hypothetically would have gotten there before, and that would have become a new neighborhood. So it's just incredible how close we were to not having Shenley Park. And then people used to have races in Shenley Park on the Shenley Oval. They used to have foot races and motorcycle races, and they used to even race motorcycles and bicycles against airplanes that would fly above them. So
that one feels hard to judge.
Yeah. So that was another thing. Just very interesting kind of random stories that have kind of been lost to time.
We have one other fun one. We talked to Tom Murphy, the previous mayor.
Yeah.
And when he was making the river trails, he had to fight a lot of fights to have continuous trails along the river with different property owners. And one of those property owners was the Steelers with their practice field in the south side. And he got them to agree that they would stave the river space, but that means their practice field is only 80 yards long, not 100 yards. So he says that's why they can't score touchdowns in the red zone. So
it's all Murphy's fault.
It's Tom Murphy's fault that the Steelers can't score touchdowns.
Well, thank y'all so much for all of your research. I know it continues. We're just so grateful to have amazing stewards of our public spaces like this who not only experience it, but tell us how to do the same thing. It's really cool. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
That is all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. Thank you again to my team for going out on a weekend to check out the city steps. It really is a blast to be able to talk about our history and our sense of shared nostalgia with Yins. If you want to learn more about Pittsburgh history, some stuff you probably have heard of, a lot of stuff you definitely haven't, check out our website. That's pittsburgh.citycast.fm. We will be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. We'll talk to you soon.
We were the #1 Pittsburgh book on Amazon for a while, and the #2 mass transportation book, right behind the CDL certification. So we were right there.
Yeah.